Witches. Do you believe in witches?
I think I do.
This time, Marianne and I take on superstition and the medieval dark arts in Britain.
I've decided to harness the forces of evil.
People believe that the devil and his disciples walked the earth,
How many dead bodies would there be?
It would have been in the hundreds.
spreading evil and disease.
You've got the plague. You've got about 2 weeks to live.
A world dominated by fear.
This is feeding off dead bodies.
But follow the dark arts, and you could pay the ultimate price.
Bit of a rock and a hard place then, hanging or burning then.
It was the time of the witch.
Becoming more and more like a Dan Brown novel.
It does appear to be.
And even less plausible.
The British Isles have a very long history. People have been living here for tens of thousands of years. And the further back you go, the more elusive and mysterious the lives of those ancient Britons appear to be.
Stonehenge. What's the point?
It's a bit like Lego.
Who were these ancient Britons? What did they believe? What was their world like?
Are you a fan of human sacrifice?
I don't practice it myself.
As a talk show host, I should know how to ask a good question.
Where are we going to, Marianne?
Clive, we are off on an adventure.
But answers are not really my strong suit.
Mummies or not mummies?
It's a tricky one, isn't it?
So I've roped in someone with more insight into the ancient world than I'll ever have. Anthropologist Marianne Ochota.
Old bones,
Old
looking at
stuff.
the past, you know everything, don't you?
I like to ask a lot of questions about the past.
Together, we're going to unlock the mystic secrets of the ancient Britons.
Prepare to embrace the very odd indeed.
Right, I'm ready for all comers.
The east of England, a landscape wrestled back from the sea. Famous for its flatness and, well, its flatness.
Well, it's the epitome of gentle British countryside around here. But when you start delving into Britain's mystic past, you soon discover that appearances can be deceptive.
Hard to believe today, but in medieval times, evil was thought to be everywhere. No more so than here in the small village of Troston, in the heart of East Anglia. Locals, like the rest of the country, believed the devil stalked the land, causing chaos and death.
Neighbour turned on neighbour. People thought the whole world was going to hell.
It was all pretty grim. So much so that people believed that the church alone couldn't save them from this evil infecting the earth. Troston's village church, St. Mary the Virgin, is a perfect example. It's been here since the early 1300s.
It's an ancient Suffolk church, but as I understand it, there's superstition written literally on the walls. Look at this, you can see a hand mark there. Is that a date? There's loads more inside. I don't know why I'm whispering.
Inside the church, the walls are covered in strange symbols that I've never seen in a church before. Matthew Champion has spent years studying this curious graffiti.
Hi, Matt. Sorry to disturb you and your... What are you, rubbing the pictures?
I'm doing tracings at the moment, so what we've got is an acetate here. We are laying it over these inscriptions, and then we're just marking them out.
So how long have these inscriptions, bits of graffiti, how long have they been here?
Well, we've got a complete mixture on the wall here. Some of this is dating back to 14th century, but unfortunately, dates don't really start appearing until the middle of the 16th century. So many of the earlier inscriptions we have to date from other means. So in the case of this full-length figure we have here of a woman, we can date this back to the late 14th or early 15th century based upon the style of costume she's wearing. We've started to realise that this can tell us things about the past that we can't find elsewhere.
Yeah.
So particularly with some of our text inscriptions, they're recording events, they're recording lives, and some of these are, actual informal memorials.
Yeah.
So in many cases, these may be the only mark that these people ever leave on this planet.
There are hundreds of these scratch marks scraped into the walls, and they have a very creepy name.
Are any of these what they call witch marks?
There are a number of these markings in here which a lot of people do call witch marks, but that's really a misnomer. These are what we call ritual protection marks, or apotropaic marks, and they're actually designed to ward off evil. So if anything, these could be regarded as anti-witch marks.
Anti-witch marks, yes.
If we go and look at the chancel, you'll see the whole area is absolutely covered.
So let's go and have a look at that, shall we?
Yeah, over this end.
But what could they be protecting themselves from that justified defacing their own church?
It might help if I actually draw this one out for you.
Yeah.
Okay, I mark out an eye there. Take it around there. We have a nice bulbous nose sticking out there. And then we have a big open mouth out there, full of sharp teeth. And then right there we have a big lolling tongue coming right up.
It's like a scene from a Hammer horror film, a sinister presence in the house of God.
So why is there an image of a demon in church?
In the Middle Ages, demons were very, very real. Demons were what brought misfortune. Demons were what suddenly caused all your cattle to drop dead. Demons were what brought sudden illness or caused sudden death.
Yeah.
Demons were part of this world.
Yeah.
But there's not just a demon here. There's a deeper mark scored over the top that shows just how scared people were of this demonic threat.
The interesting one about this is you'll notice that right over the top we have this pentacle, this 5-pointed star.
Yeah.
And you'll see it's much deeper than the demon. It's been inscribed. It's almost like it's been gone over time and time again. And it sits directly on top of that demon, pinning it to the wall there.
Nowadays, the pentacle is considered a satanic symbol. But according to Matt, it meant exactly the opposite in medieval times.
The pentacle is unusual in the fact we actually have a written account that tells us exactly what it means. If you go back to the 14th century poem of Gawain and the Green Knight, which I'm sure you've read in the original Middle English.
I read it every night.
Absolutely. He talks in there about the pentacle, and he says it represents the 5 wounds of Christ. It represents the 5 virtues of the knight. It represents the 5 fingers of the hand given by God to do good deeds. So in this instance, we see the pentacle being used to pin this demon to the wall.
Right.
Essentially, it's taking away its power and it's trapping it here. So it's acting more like a demon trap.
Right. So we're standing where a demon could be trapped in that pentacle. It's becoming more and more like a Dan Brown novel the whole time we're here, isn't it?
It does appear to be.
Yes. And even less plausible.
The idea of demons wandering around cursing everyone does sound a bit odd. Was something strange going on to cause such hysteria? I'm meeting a man here at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford who might have the answers. A professor of medieval paganism. Yep, that's a real job. Ronald, was there something particularly scary about being alive in the Middle Ages?
Yeah, in most traditional societies, about half of all children are going to die of natural causes before the age of 5. And large-scale disease kills maybe up to half the population of Europe in a few years and then hangs around.
By the end of the 13th century, average life expectancy was just 31 and a bit years. These were properly scary times.
Medieval people had absolutely no explanation for how a lot of the natural world works. For example, they didn't know where disease comes from. So one moment somebody's well, the next they're ill. So an obvious explanation is their body's been invaded by demons or by spells or curses.
Did people think that they were having everyday interactions with demons then?
Demons are usually invisible. Their spirits are there. They're originally angels. They're not bodily beings. But they can form themselves into visual shapes. They're absolute masters of illusion. And they can appear as anything they want to be, as animals, as beautiful human beings, whatever they wish. But their true physical form, when they assume it, is that of hideous, deformed monsters, often with bits of particularly nasty animals built into them.
Chilling. No wonder they needed protection. They believed the devil was everywhere, hell-bent on causing trouble, bad luck, disease, and death.
Ronald, these marks here,
Yeah.
where were these found?
They're found on this door, which was for a calf shed in East Anglia. And the marks are there presumably to protect the animals inside. The belief was that they warded off evil, evil in general, evil spirits, curses. These are there to protect.
The devil was even after their livestock. So it's not surprising that people were determined to stop him.
They look moderately complicated. I feel like I had a spirograph that did stuff like that when I was a kid, but...
Yes, you need tools to do this.
Now, I've got a handy ritual protection mark kit here. Look, I'm ready. I'm ready to
Fine.
stop the devil. So
Yeah.
is this a case of the making of the mark is as important as the mark that you end up with?
We presume so. Certainly the act of protection and consecration is a powerful magical act and therefore would have, we presume, immense significance in itself. And you've just made a wonderful job.
Well, that's very kind of you.
Congratulations.
I'll let you take that home.
Like the pentagram, this daisy wheel symbol is a trap because it turns out demons just can't resist a doodle.
So the principle is that the demon flies in, and because they love following lines, obviously, they get tangled up in my daisy.
So basically, demons are evil, but very stupid.
Another explanation is this is a no-entry sign, so a speeding demon will head for the door, suddenly see that sign, screech for a halt, turn round and run. So a kind of warning there's a spiritual shotgun waiting for him.
It seems nuts to us that you could trap a demon with patterns, but that's what people really believed. In their world, the crazy ones were those that didn't do it.
This looks like a Marianne-style daisy wheel that didn't go quite to plan.
That's right, and here these spectacle-like forms here are conjoined circles. It's two circles joined together for extra protection.
I have to say, I find them a little bit creepy. Just the idea that, you know, you're walking into a dark barn and you use these marks to protect yourself.
The world is a scary place if you're poor and on the economic margins. If I were a country person and believed in these marks, I'd find them immensely reassuring.
It might seem pretty far-fetched to think that drawing on a door would protect the livestock within. It's easy to dismiss that as primitive and possibly a little bit bonkers. But don't forget, this is a period before we're all taught science at school. This is a period before the rational way of looking at the world is the default way that we think. For medieval people, the world was ordered into good and evil. And so this was a perfectly rational explanation for misfortune. It was evil.
For hundreds of years, people used these symbols to keep themselves safe. But there's evil, and then there's evil. In the 14th century, something truly terrible happened. To people living in the grim Middle Ages, it could only be the work of Satan. About 50 miles from Troston, in the picturesque village of Ashwell, local archaeologist Sarah Talks has brought me to see some very ominous scratch marks scraped into the walls of St Mary's, the village church.
It's the tower where the graffiti
Where
is
you've disfigured your
particularly-
church over the centuries. And this stone is ideal for this, because
It is. It's very soft. It's easy to inscribe.
Yeah.
And people have discovered that for themselves all around the church.
All right, so you've got more modern...
We've got more modern
Yes,
graffiti,
yeah.
yes.
So you've got a picture here. What's this a picture of?
Yes, so we've got a drawing here which is thought to be Old St Paul's Cathedral in London, but the key thing is that it's before the Great Fire, so it's without the dome that we recognise today.
Because the Great Fire was 1666, so
Yes.
this is 2 centuries before that.
Yes.
But who's done this, though? Just obviously somebody who's been to London or is a Londoner, perhaps.
Yes, I think that's quite likely. Somebody has seen that building in London. They've either drawn it there or they've got it very clearly in their head, then drawing this on the wall for people to see.
You can almost imagine a conversation, some cocky Cockney saying, "Oh yeah, we've got a bigger cathedral in London."
Yes.
Well, what's it like? Well, I'll show you. And he's somehow
It's all
remembered.
out. And beautiful detailing, really.
There's any sort of, you know, I was here or I love her or something.
Yes, we've got all sorts of things.
Yeah.
We've got personal names mentioned, something about Barbara being barbarous.
Yeah.
Also,
Barbarous meaning
a sort of bit of a goer, I think.
a bit of a go. Well, that's nice for her, isn't it, in a way,
Yes,
to be remembered
to
all
be
these.
remembered.
Yeah.
And also something about the archdeacon being a bit of an ass.
Yes.
So yes,
So that's not so good. He's remembered as a bit of an ass.
He is.
But
Barbara's remembered as a lively lady. Yes.
But Sarah hasn't brought me here to see idle church gossip. The graffiti she wants to show me is a permanent record of one of the most deadly tragedies ever to hit the country.
Primula pestis.
Yes.
A little bit more writing and then the date. So that's recording the first time that the plague really affected this place, 1349.
The bubonic plague, or Black Death, swept through the country between 1348 and 1350, killing up to half the population. The first sign of infection was a high fever. Nausea, vomiting and diarrhea often followed. Infected lymph glands swelled up with blood into black lumps called buboes. Gangrene often set in, a slow and agonizing death. This was evil incarnate. It had to be the work of the devil.
It's saying that we are miserable dregs, are sort of cowering here in the church, taking shelter.
They might even be thinking, you know, none of us are going to survive. We're just going to record.
Absolutely.
The plague killed us.
Absolutely.
Or the plague came through here.
And they were right, because we don't have any written records on paper of that happening here.
Yeah.
But we have this. So they were right in that it has lasted all this time.
It's believed more than a third of the village was wiped out by the disease.
If so many people died, I expect there to be lots and lots of gravestones to
Yes,
record this.
yes.
How many dead bodies would there be?
It would have been in the hundreds.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. It would have been in the hundreds.
But no gravestones mark this tragedy. The plague victims died in such overwhelming numbers, they had to be buried together in mass graves.
You needed to dispose of the dead bodies as quickly as possible.
And what evidence do you have that there are bodies under the ground here?
Well, throughout the graveyard, we do have bits of bone come up. These things come up in the tree roots.
The tree roots bring up bones.
Yes, they do. And we
Yeah.
carefully collect them together. We keep them in a box, and then when somebody else is interred or there's something else, the vicar will very carefully put them back in.
Oh, so it's
to
like
do a little ceremony.
Yeah.
Back in the Middle Ages, there was no cure for the plague. But that didn't stop people trying pretty much anything to avoid succumbing to this terrifying illness. The Wellcome Collection in London holds records of many of the supposed and rather bizarre cures for the plague.
So one of the things I have here is a manuscript from the end of the 15th century.
Dr. Elma Brenner is an expert in the strange world of the medieval doctor.
The plague charm that we have here on this page, they're using the format of the circular diagram, which is a kind of universal medieval format, to give protection against pestilence.
This plague charm looks very similar to the daisy wheel witch mark I saw in Troston. Only it seems protecting against the plague required a more visceral commitment.
These charms quite often have some kind of instruction to write them on the body, sometimes in blood. But you could do other things with this. You could copy it onto a scrap of paper and carry it on your body, for instance.
Of course, doctors did exist in medieval times. Unfortunately, they were as clueless as their patients as to the real cause of the plague. But that didn't stop them profiting from it.
Physicians quite often got bad reputations for being very wealthy and shamelessly charging a lot of money for their advice.
Now, look, another thing I want to ask you about is because the image I have in my mind is of a plague doctor with a special costume. So I've actually acquired for myself the sort of thing that people would wear.
Yeah, and obviously it's something that looks strange to us. It actually comes from continental Europe, so particularly France and Italy.
The Europeans settled on this look in the 17th century, proving they could even deal with the plague more stylishly than we could.
So this is the outfit I've got on, all but the top bit.
Yeah.
So the gloves are more like motorcycle gauntlets.
Yep.
which obviously would protect against the germs getting in. And I've got a big stick. Now, what's this? Is this just a standard stick, or did it have some function, do you think, as a plague doctor?
Yeah, I mean, I think it adds to the distance from the patient.
Yes.
He wouldn't have to go up close to them.
So he could say, look, you've got buboes there.
Exactly.
This is virtually the barge pole that you don't want to touch things with. No, I suppose this is the most fascinating thing.
The beak was there so that there would be something in front of the respiratory area that was filled with heavily aromatic plants that were understood to purify the air.
Is this what the plague doctor might look like?
Yeah, I mean, what we can say is that this would be a physician that you would encounter and you would not be able to see his face at all.
Right.
So in that sense, it's more of a negative than a positive encounter, I think it's likely to say.
Right, well, I have to move on. I've got a lot of other patients to see. You've got the plague. You've got about 2 weeks to live. I wonder if you could pay the money for my fee on your way out.
The grim reality was that nothing stopped the march of the Black Death. Not protection marks, charms, or plague doctors. But rather than taking this as proof that superstition and magic didn't work, people fought fire with fire. In one church, there's evidence that magic could be much more targeted, taking on evil at its own game. And as with the witch marks, once again, the church was getting in on the act. Matthew Champion has invited me to Norwich Cathedral to show me just how sinister things had become.
So if I put the light on this, essentially this is the area we're looking at here. First of all, we have this medieval text up here, but you'll note it's upside down.
Yeah, I can't read that.
Yeah, it's inverted. So we've got the letters K, A, Y, N, F, F, O, R, D, which taken together make up the surname Cainford. It's an old Norwich family. And then down here, this other element is actually an astrological symbol. And in this case, we've got a combination of the symbol for the sun and the moon.
Right, OK, so this teardrop shape.
Yeah, and the other line that comes down just out of there as well. This is, believe it or not, a medieval curse.
Wow, poor old Cainfords.
Absolutely.
So you write someone's name backwards, upside down, you draw this astrological symbol, and that's going to send bad luck to the Cainfords.
Maybe a lot more than bad luck.
What's clear from these creepy marks is that magic is not just being used for defense, it's about attack as well.
This was to bring down God's wrath upon these individuals. And here we are, having this inscribed into the stones of a cathedral. These stones, as well, of course, have been consecrated. They contain power in their own right. So it's almost directing that power against that individual.
In case finding black magic in a church isn't bad enough, this curse has been carved in a place where only the clergy would have gone.
We're in an area of the cathedral where mostly the public would not have had access to. This is also clearly done by someone who was literate and very used to the writing arts. So this is clearly done by someone who's educated, and someone who's educated enough to understand about a classical curse. So the chances are this has been created by a member of the cathedral community.
So it looks like priests were offering the sacred power of the church building to supercharge their curses.
The question, of course, is, did it work?
Yeah, are they all dead?
They all died out in the 17th century, so who knows?
It took a while.
It took a while.
Can I have a go?
I'm sure you can have a go.
I mean, not that I want to curse anyone, honestly, but, you know, there's nothing like doing it to learn.
That's, yeah, it is the best way.
Learning.
Yeah.
OK, right, OK.
Best way.
So I've got my paper. I'm going to curse Clive. Sorry, Clive. So that's Clive.
Yep.
So now I write it backwards.
Backwards.
E, V, I. Evil C. Clive backwards is evil C.
Now all you need is the second element, your astrological symbol.
I think it's bad enough as it is. OK, so vertical line.
Yep. Then your teardrop shape.
Teardrop shape. Yeah.
And then your longer line going from right to left.
Wiggly line. That's a bit of a rubbish teardrop, isn't it?
And then the foot at the bottom.
The foot at the bottom.
And now, to make that effective, is you need to inscribe that or attach that to something of spiritual significance, church, something of that nature.
I feel like that might be where I stop, but I've got it. So if he mucks me about, I can always whip it out
Yeah,
and
keep it close.
do something bad with it. That's fascinating. Controlling evil with curses, with marks, with pictures scribed into stone is a fact of life, not just for the average man on the street, but for the church as well.
Given the state of the world, it's hardly surprising people believed in the power of superstition and curses. The country was bursting at the seams with magic and counter-magic. I think it's time Marianne and I met up to see if we can make sense of all this hocus-pocus.
Who would have thought you could learn so much about people's thoughts and superstitions by looking at a few scratch marks on the pillars of churches?
Isn't it exciting? It's not just a few scratch marks, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
How is it okay to graffiti a church?
Yeah.
Because we've been so schooled into thinking that graffiti is a bad thing and you definitely don't do it on places of worship.
No.
The idea that everybody's trundling into the church and, you know, getting down
Yeah.
on their hands and knees and scratching their own little prayer into
Maybe it's because they
stonework.
didn't have bus shelters in those days, so they didn't have anywhere else to do it. That was the only stone building. Also, I suppose people went to church a lot more because you kind of had to, and you were hanging around.
So you've got to find something to do.
Well, it might be because you're bored, or it could easily be that you were scared of life events, or, you know, poor old Uncle Jack's died. Well, we can't afford a tombstone, so we'll scratch something on the wall there.
There's lots of reasons to make a mark, but it just seems so profoundly odd to be scratching it into a church. Yeah. The amazing thing is that these pieces of graffiti, these ritual protection marks and images of demons being pinned down by pentangles and written prayers and curses aren't just being done by the parishioners. They're also being done by the priest.
So it's not seen as a desecration of the church to put a demon on it?
Or, as I saw in Norwich Cathedral, someone writing in beautiful lettering a curse against a local family, and it's in the bit behind the altar. It's an extraordinary, holy part of the church where only members of the clergy would have been allowed to go. So this isn't just the naughty choir boys. This is the folk who are standing on the altar. They're getting involved with this too. This goes right to the top.
For around 300 years, the church had been condoning, or at least turning a blind eye, to protection marks and black magic curses. But midway through the 16th century, they began to disappear from places of worship. So what happened? Well, this man did. Henry VIII. In 1542, he introduced a new law that made evil, the devil's work, a criminal offence. Henry's new act stated, "It shall be felony to practice or cause to be practiced conjuration, enchantment, witchcraft, or sorcery." Evil had a new name. The Witch.
What grand entrance, man.
It's all right, isn't it?
Knowle House was one of Henry VIII's favourite estates, and I've come here to talk to historian James Wright.
So this is the point in Britain where people stop thinking about the general spirits of evil and they actually start talking about fearing and finding witches.
I think there's certainly a move in that direction in society, yes, in terms of the idea of witches acting as a conduit for that evil. And you've got to remember, for people in this period, the devil is a real character. He is incarnate and he is moving through the land and he is tempting you and he wants to possess your soul and he is really going for you. And as a result of that, they start blaming witches in league with the devil.
The key thing about Henry's new law was that unlike those immaterial demons, witches were actual people. They can be caught, prosecuted, and killed. But just because evil was now the responsibility of the law, it didn't stop people persisting with the old ways, sometimes right underneath your nose, or feet, anyway.
James, what is this place you've brought me to?
This is the King's Tower.
What's important about this tower is that it was completely remodelled around 60 years after the witchcraft laws were introduced.
If we look beneath these floorboards here, and we'll actually be able to see some evidence of ritual protection beneath the floors.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to take this one here,
Yeah.
and I'll take this one, you may be able to see
Okay,
some
so
scratches into the timber.
I'm moderately underwhelmed, I'll be honest. I was expecting some kind of effigy of an upside-down, you know, goblin on a spike or something.
Well, what
that looks like a slightly skew-if noughts and crosses board.
Yeah, it does. What you're looking at there is a kind of a bastardised pentagram. So it's a protective symbol, which
Right.
either drives away evil spirits or possibly pins them to the timber itself.
So then they can't go beyond and cause havoc.
Exactly, yeah.
What year are we talking about when these were put on?
We had some tree ring dating, some dendrochronology done on this particular beam. And we found out that the tree that it came out of was felled in the winter of 1605. So we can, and this is quite rare in the world of historic graffiti, but we can tie these down to a particular moment in time, namely somewhere in the first half of 1606.
So Henry VIII hadn't put an end to superstitious beliefs. They were still very common and widespread. It had just driven them out of the church and into the shadows. And by the time James I came to the throne in 1603, 56 years after Henry VIII, things were in a right mess. Accusations of witchcraft were everywhere. Around a fifth of murders were being blamed on witches, which I bet is a defence Clive never used when he was practising law.
He's a very complex character, James. He's inherently interested in witchcraft.
James's interest in witches started with an incident that took place in 1589.
He was travelling over to Denmark to basically bring back his wife-to-be, Anne of Denmark, and there was an enormous storm, and he was persuaded that that storm had been effectively cooked up by a coven of witches who were based in North Berwick. And James himself led some of the interrogations into that coven. He was involved in the trials, and he sent a huge number of people to be executed as a result of that. And because of his involvement in those trials, he wrote a witch-hunting manual, which was called the Demonology.
First published in 1597, Demonology was James's attempt to rationalise the belief in witches. The king wanted to cut out any bogus accusations of witchcraft, but also make sure the guilty was suitably punished. Demonology explained how to spot witchcraft and how to punish the guilty with death.
So James I is hands-on with interrogating witches and telling his subjects what to do about them when you find them.
He considered himself to be quite the scholar. So when he sat down to write this manual, he was reflecting firstly his own beliefs, but also wider beliefs in society.
James's book didn't invent witches, but he had, unwittingly, created the ultimate witch-hunting guidebook. Which brings us back to Ronald, our own witchcraft guide.
Ronald, where did the stereotype of a witch come from?
The exact stereotype of the witch as a horrid, cackling old woman is ancient Roman. Roman poets like Horace wrote descriptions of evil women meeting at night in graveyards in pre-Christian times to make bad magic together. And just for the record, Shakespeare's Witch's Chant, his Scottish play, double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble, actually quotes at one point from the Roman poet Horace. So you can see the transmission of the image over 2,000 years.
Why is it that witches are believed to be women? Is this just misogyny masquerading as, well, we'll call them witches and now we're allowed to hate them?
Medieval, early modern Europeans do fear witchcraft so genuinely and so passionately that it is the issue. And it happens to be a coincidence across much of Europe that women are regarded since prehistory as the more magical sex. When you look at the people who are accused, they tend to be people whom the community doesn't like, not so much because they're nonconformists, because they're sharp-tongued, they're quarrelsome. They don't get on with their neighbours. Now, you can be a perfectly decent person and just have a short fuse, and you'll still attract an accusation of witchcraft.
All these images have depictions of witches, and there's themes that keep cropping up, aren't there? There's these women are cooking up spells and demons and disemboweling men.
Yes, it's an absolute role reversal of everything that women are supposed to be. Satanic witchcraft is a role reversal of everything the world is supposed to be. You're serving Satan instead of God. It's women who are dominant instead of men. So all this is a kind of satanic pantomime, a mirror image of what a good society should be.
To us, it all seems rather fanciful, but you have to remember, at the time, people not only believed in magic, they practiced it.
So what exactly was the practice of witchcraft? How did it work? Was it really witches zooming around on broomsticks and brewing up eye of newt and toe of frog? Or was it something more sinister? What were those witches up to?
If anywhere has the answer to that question, it's here. Oxford's Pitt Rivers Museum. Inside is one of the world's most wide-ranging collections of anthropological artifacts, and a lot of it is downright macabre.
Ah, so here are the magical items that can protect you from perils of the everyday.
Museum curator Nicholas Crowe has evidence that people were using magic despite the risk that they could be killed for it.
Nicholas, at the point where James I has officially declared that witches are everywhere and magic is evil, what kind of things are people getting up to?
So on this table, we've got some nice examples that really highlight the fear at the time that people were feeling. So we have these rowan tree loops. Now, the rowan tree was well known for its protective qualities. These particular examples were hung on the gate of a house as a protection against witches.
It's simple, isn't it? It's such a simple, natural thing that suddenly becomes this, like, really potent, slightly creepy artifact. And that's the same with these crosses here.
Yeah.
So that's rowan tree wood
Rowan
as
tree
well.
as well.
Oh, and you just force one twig through the other. Wow.
These are essentially a modern-day burglar alarm. You know, you're sort of setting your perimeters of protection.
Defend yourself from the malevolent forces from the wider world.
You know, the sort of landscape at that time would have been a landscape of fear, and you would want to do anything you can to help protect yourself, your family, your cattle,
yeah,
whatever it may be.
Simple, creepy.
We've got, for example, this sheep's heart that had been stuck with pins.
Awesome.
So if you imagine, you know, the heart is a source of blood being pumped around the body, and to put pins in there is creating a stoppage or a sort of block.
I can't help but notice this rubber chicken person here. What is that?
A mandrake root, very popular because of their human-like appearance. And if you want to pick it up and have a look, these...
So this is a natural root of the mandrake plant?
Yes, that's right.
And it grows like that naturally?
Yes.
It looks like a creepy person dancing.
Looks like a creepy person.
Got arms, legs, a tail. Yeah. It's sort of doing a bit of a tap dance. It's got a teat.
A teat.
From which the devil may suckle.
Well, we actually have quite a nice account here.
In a book called The Mystic Mandrake.
It talks about the leaves and fruit being called charnel food. It was believed only to grow beside the gallows tree or near crossroads where suicides were buried. Whither witches went to gather them and uprooted the plants, which they used for the purpose of magic. When uprooted, it was said to utter shrieks and groans like a human being, and its agony was dreadful to hear.
Oh, so charnel food, that this is feeding off dead bodies.
Yes.
As we're in the 21st century, witchcraft is thankfully no longer punishable by death, so I reckon I can safely find out more.
If I wanted to dabble in bad magic, or I thought that someone had cursed me and I want to throw it back in their stupid face. What is it that I have to do?
Something you could do, actually, is make a witch bottle.
Oh, that sounds fun. What do I do to do that?
So, what you'll need, firstly, is a bottle.
Right.
Ideally, you'd want one similar to human form. This was a beer jug or a wine jug, a decanter.
OK, so I've drunk my beer, I've got my empty bottle.
Next, you want to think about what you want to put inside this. This particular jug, there was a cloth heart with nails stuck into it.
That's suitably creepy.
So you'll want some connection between you and the person who you're causing harm. So you might want to get hair, for example, or nail clippings.
And I've heard that you can put urine in as well.
If you've got urine to hand, then...
If I can manage to get it in the hole, I think you're already deploying black magic to be able to pee into that bottle without too much trouble as well. And then what do I do, like, throw it at them?
No, often these were left in sort of thresholds, so you'd want to hide it away somewhere.
OK, so in the doorway,
Exactly.
next to the fire.
Yes.
And then just wait for the badness to happen.
Yes.
It might seem a bit ridiculous now, but back then, people believed in the power of witchcraft like they believed that the sun rose in the morning. Hiding a bottle in the doorway is one thing, but how does it really feel to immerse yourself in some of the darker, nastier curses? Let's find out.
There's a whole smorgasbord of weird and wonderful things you can do to harness the forces of good and evil, and they're all pretty homegrown. So, I went to the DIY shop and I've bought myself some nails. I found a feather. I'm going to call it the devil's feather. And in here, the no longer beating heart of a recently deceased pig. This has been slaughtered appropriately. It wasn't me in the dead of night in a farmyard. And I'm going to have a go. There are many examples of hearts stabbed and pierced with thorns and nails, and then they're buried in the floorboards, in the voids between walls. They're wrapped in muslin, but they've always got these... Oh, it feels weird to do this. Also, it's quite... Oh. They've got nails stabbed into them. And we think the reason for doing this kind of ritual practice is because if you thought that your neighbour had cursed you and it had killed your livestock, perhaps your prize pig, then you would cut out the heart of said pig and you would stab it, and every nail would cause them pain, inflict damage on their livestock, on their children, on their household, or perhaps themselves. I am not a believer in magic, the witchcraft, God or the devil, but it is really horrible. By doing that, I want to hurt them or harm them. I want to kill their animals or kill their children. It's grim. Right, I think that's probably ready to bury under my floorboards. And then some poor builder, many hundreds of years later, or someone who's rootling around emptying out Granny's loft, discovers it and goes, what on earth was the old woman up to? The answer is, very nice things. Bad Granny.
I suppose nowadays you'd say something horrible about them on social media. Probably more effective too.
Back in James I's time, though, if Mary Ann had been discovered doing something as grotesque as that, she could very easily have ended up here.
This is the jail of Colchester Castle. Rather unpleasant. I mean, it would have been a lot more unpleasant 2 or 3 centuries ago.
The county of Essex took witch hunting very seriously. They imprisoned more than 200 suspected witches here, more than anywhere else in the country.
Would have been very, very smelly, very unpleasant to be in here. Much, much darker, obviously, than it is now.
Right. Conditions in Colchester jail were dreadful. Up to 30 people in a cell, no sanitation. Disease was rife.
So how long would people spend in here? Was this like a prison where you did sentences or somewhere you were kept before trial?
This was more a prison where you would be kept before trial, particularly really serious crimes like witchcraft.
Witchcraft trials only took place twice a year, so suspected witches were kept in these awful conditions for months. Many died before even reaching the courtroom.
What constituted an accusation of witchcraft?
It was usually a problematic relationship with a neighbour. But the key thing from a legal point of view was, in England, witchcraft was actually classified as a felony and not a heresy. And if it had been classified as a heresy, which is a religious crime, then people would actually have been executed by burning. But you need to remember that hanging in the 16th and 17th century was slow asphyxiation. It was quite a slow, unpleasant...
Bit of a rock and a hard place, then, hanging or burning, then.
The good news was, if a suspected witch did survive the dreadful conditions of the cells, the odds of being found innocent were actually pretty good. 3 out of 4 alleged witches got off. Because actually proving magical powers turned out to be pretty tricky. That said, the authorities did manage to prove the impossible 25% of the time.
I saw some reference that you can recognise witches by their wrinkles. So if you're a beautiful young woman, you can get away with it, or you're not accused, or nobody wants to execute you. When you're old and generally being spat upon, that's when you can be hauled away. And when do these trials stop?
The very last execution in England for witchcraft was in the 1680s. So actually England stopped hanging people for witchcraft relatively early on.
Well, it is very evocative being in the very place, the very cell, where people were being held to be on trial for something as irrational as witchcraft.
The death penalty for witchcraft was finally abolished in 1736 in an attempt to rid the country of its witch hysteria. But by then, around 500 people had been executed, 90% of whom were women. But if you think the irrational belief in magic has been eradicated, or that science has rid us of these crazy ideas, think again. What happens when a black cat crosses your path? Or you catch yourself walking under a ladder? Or throwing salt over your shoulder? Superstitious practices are alive and well. And who can say they're any more rational than protection charms or spell bottles? Still, the good news is they haven't caught Mary Ann yet.
Clive, I've been getting up to mischief.
Have you?
I put your name in a curse.
That's beyond mischief, isn't it?
But do you know, your name backwards is Evil C.
I'm afraid I do know that, because one of my children pointed this out a while ago, and she always addresses me as Evil C.
So, I do know that. That's how I'm going to address you now.
Yes, Evil
forever.
C. Yeah, but I am surprised that you've already decided to put a curse on me.
No,
People who know me longer often get to that point.
You don't need to worry about it. Do you know what else I did? I stabbed a heart with floor nails. I've had a very adventurous couple of weeks.
Just thinking, you've put a curse on me, you've stabbed a heart. I'm just testing that mine is still going. When you bring those two together, I feel better now. Because I made a little model of you out of wax and started stabbing it with pins. So I don't know if you've been feeling a bit rheumatic at all.
Explains so much.